Così mi presento a Bert Ludwig. Bert, are you there? Hello, Bert.
Hello.
Good evening. Here we are. Welcome. I turn so you can see your audience. Sorry for the delay, but we have had some technical problems. So welcome with us tonight. It's a pleasure to present you once more. Bert Ludwig is in with the concept of fiber is carpenter and is, I don't know if you prefer to be carpenter or architect and PhD architect from the Weimar University. Anyway, I think that both identities are interesting to show the public today the energy you have every year to lead and organize European Heritage Volunteer Program. The word is yours, Bert, when you want.
Yeah, welcome. Good evening. I know that we are a bit late, and so I tried to squeeze in 15, maximally 20 minutes the presentation, which had been planned to be a bit longer. I want to present you today the European Heritage Volunteers Program as an opportunity to get non-formal education and practical experience in heritage field, and at the same moment to contribute to the awareness raising and the conservation of heritage all over Europe. Next slide, please. The European Heritage Volunteers Program has 3 central points, as you can see. Volunteering for heritage, as it is set by the name of the program, heritage education, which is not occasionally standing in the middle, because it's in fact the core point of the program. And last but not least, often a bit underappreciated, the networking of young heritage professionals, because by coming together, working together, studying together in the projects, they establish contacts of which they can make use later in their career. On the next slide, we have summarized some facts about the organization, which I will not repeat because you can read them in addition, at least when it's visible on the screen. Formally, European Heritage Volunteers is an organization, NGO, non-profit organization, non-governmental organization based in Germany, working under German law, but engaged all over Europe. Europe, in a way, what is really important to underline, not in understanding, not as European Union, but really in accordance to the European Council definition, meaning Europe as the cultural space from Portugal in the west till Armenia and Georgia in the east, from the very north, Finland, Russia, northern Russia, up to the south in Greece or in Albania. You had time in the meantime to read the other facts there. Around 3 decades, more than 3 decades of experience. You see the numbers of projects of countries where we are working. And you see one thing, the participants are not coming only from European countries. The projects are taking place in the European countries, but the participants are coming from all over the world. But most of them who are coming from beyond Europe are studying or working in Europe. This brings me to the next topic. The main target group are students of heritage-related fields, as are now in the room, and young heritage professionals. We are targeting to people who are in the last year or last 2 years of their studies on one hand, and who are on the other hand starting their professional career and still want to have a certain orientation. Since we have a short time, I will not go more into these formal details, but show you the map, which illustrates very well the diversity of work all over Europe, starting from the very, very west, as I said, in Portugal, but going really to the east. You see dots there in Russia and Ukraine, where we can currently not work in both countries, but you see also in Armenia and Georgia and Azerbaijan. That means we try really to illustrate that Europe is a joint cultural space and not only limiting our activities on Western and Middle Europe, despite we have a certain focus on Middle Europe being rooted and being formally organized in Germany. But you see that there are lots of projects and training courses in the Balkans, in Southeastern Europe, and also in Eastern Europe. On the next slide, I will show some insights in projects and courses from the past. It doesn't move, I see, but I will talk. I will use the time to explain the frame. The frame is to bring, thank you, the frame is, thank you, to bring together in training courses and projects of 2 weeks duration between 12 and 15, 16 young heritage professionals and students from different countries of origin and different professional backgrounds, all related to heritage, but in a diverse way related to heritage. That means the projects bring together people who are studying or had been studying architecture, engineering, but also history, history of arts, museology, conservation, restoration, and also some other fields which are a bit far away as culture entrepreneurship, culture management, museology, and so on. That means it's 2 weeks of very intense being together, working together, learning together, consisting of a practical working part, which is the core of the project and training courses, and additional educational activities in the afternoons, in the evenings, and on the weekend in between. That means it's really a very dense, very intensive experience, learning experience, exchanging experience, and it opens the opportunity to discover a new aspect of heritage, a new field of activity in the heritage, or also to say, okay, that's interesting, but it's not my field I want to work in the future on. On the next slide, you see a certain selection of projects and training courses we have been carrying out in the past. You see there that are several courses and projects who have been taking place on World Heritage sites, UNESCO World Heritage site. And we had not been working yet on the Balearic Islands, but you see we have another project on the island, on the left-hand side, on Maligrad Island in Albania and Prespa Lake. In the next slide, we can see the different topics we are working on. On one hand, working on traditional techniques. Yeah, on traditional techniques, as you see above in the wooden churches in northern Russia, as you see also on the right-hand side. To wooden techniques, but also clay techniques and masonry techniques. I will come later to this. And as I had been mentioning already before, we are working also both in Russia as well in Ukraine. And despite it's currently for safety reasons and political reasons not possible to work in these countries, it was a decision to keep these projects on our slide because the cultural heritage of Europe, of various European countries, does independently have a value and is even now more endangered of independently of the current political situation. And as you see also in the lower part, we are working in countries where it is really not easy to work, but because the structures are not very reliable and very fragile, but on the other hand, where it's really neat to work. Albania is one of the countries, Kosovo is one of the other countries, or even the Ukrainian and the Russian examples where we can not only teach and educate the participants, but also provide an experience, a learning experience, and in addition to contribute to the preservation and the conservation of the sites. Now let's jump to the 2023 year calendar. We have two project lines, the training courses and the volunteering project. The training courses are a bit more orientated on the educational part, providing a bit more background knowledge and more comprehensive education in a particular field. If you could please jump to the next slide. More comprehensive knowledge. Meanwhile, the volunteering projects more contribute to the conservation of the site, but at the end, in both types of projects, training courses and volunteering projects, as well as the practical aspect, as well as the educational aspect are included. On the next slide, we have a selection of training courses which will be taking place this year. And I selected examples which standing exemplary for the program. Above you have, let's say, actual topics dedicated to projects and training courses dedicated to the aspect of sustainability, sustainable practices of heritage conservation in times of climate change. But we also try to go towards the borders of heritage, or to interpret the heritage definition as wide as possible, including contested heritage. Right above, you see a cemetery, a soldier cemetery, which is maybe not the first um, issue you would think about if thinking about heritage, but just in actual times, in current times, very actual. We have projects dedicated to technical heritage and industrial heritage, and we have, as you see below, projects and training courses dedicated to Jewish heritage. And concerning the topics, we are training particular fields of techniques. We have training courses about traditional lime plasters, as you see here in cooperation with the Training and Education Center of the Federal Heritage Authority in Austria. We have training courses on fresco techniques and restoration conservation of frescoes. Next slide, please. And as you see on the next slide, also training courses on conservation and restoration of leather, of textile, of paper, materials, which for people who are studying architecture or have been studying architecture, maybe not the first idea when thinking about heritage. Also above, we have another wall painting example. In addition, we are working on documentation and training the people on documentation and survey, both at complexes, historic complexes, as you see right above in Latvia, and also you see in the Bulgarian example on the right-hand side. This is a very stunning training course because it's dedicated to the documentation of architecture, but in particular earthen vernacular architecture. We are working quite a lot in vernacular architecture because, yeah, castles and cathedrals are mostly already well researched and well documented. There's some exceptions, as the case in Latvia, which had been recently used till recent times as a hospital, but usually you have a documentation. Meanwhile, vernacular architecture is often underappreciated and so not so very well documented. And if you see this building, three-floor building from Ramet Earth, it's stunning. Another case working in vernacular architecture you have on the left-hand side below. We have a very strong and close cooperation with the National Open Air Museum of Lithuania, where we are working in different ways related to the material wood. Finally, also the 20th century heritage plays a role. You see right below, where we are working on a prefabricated wooden modernistic heritage, very stunning topic. The house you see on the photo is a villa designed by Konrad Wachsmann, the famous modernistic architect, who had, beside the famous works famous from his time in US, also when before he had to escape because he was Jewish from Germany, worked on the field of prefabricated wooden buildings, and we will be translocating one of them. On the next slide, you have a short overview about the volunteering projects. As I said, it's similar to the training courses, but a bit more practically, a bit less time for education, but the more time to understand and to experience practical challenges and the practical reality on the construction side and the heritage side. And I have also selected on the next slide 6 examples more. We have a volunteering project on this fascinating fortress. Is a ruin of a castle, a fortress in the middle of the forest in Slovakia. And you see it's endless restoration and conservation works, but therefore, the NGO who is managing the castle decided to understand the conservation process of the castle, not only as conservation, but as a practical place to teach traditional heritage techniques, in particular masonry techniques and techniques of traditional walls. Um, As mentioned already before, we are working a lot in vernacular architecture. On the right-hand side graph, you see a also stunning building from Adobe Techniques in Albania on that lake I had been mentioning before. Highly endangered, but it's a core building of a whole set of vernacular architecture, and we will this year close the roof and start with the conservation of the building in order to have it as I said, as a crucial point of the conservation of a whole set of vernacular architecture. On the left-hand side, you see other vernacular architecture in Montenegro, in Gornji Stoliv, also World Heritage Site, a village which had been dying out. Out of formerly 700 inhabitants, there are now remaining 2 or 3. And we are working there on traditional roofs and staircases. I will show later another slide. On dry stone techniques, dry stone techniques is also one of our specializations. This is a typical culture asset all over Europe, even in Germany. The project, which is taking place already since 13 years. And last but not least, traditional wood techniques is one of our, coming from the background of carpentry, one of our traditional format of projects, and every year we have at least one project dedicated to archaeological excavation and documentation conservation of archaeological findings. On the next slide, in case that anybody of you really would wish to participate and would have time, in 4 weeks starts our first spring project, which is really dedicated. I have heard that you are interested in dry stone walling and stone-related techniques. This all you will have complimented in this 2-week project. On one hand, a conservation restoration of a cobblestone path leading for more than 1 kilometer from the seashore to this village was on the way to die out. On the right-hand side, dry stone walls in the traditional local technique, highly endangered to collapse. And in the middle, the most interesting place, because it's the only building in the whole village and one of the few buildings in all the bay which is still covered with traditional way with stone slabs. There we will be working in close cooperation with the community 2 weeks. In the next slide, I have a short information about European Heritage Times, in case that anybody wants to contribute not practically to the conservation of heritage sites, but want to spread the message about European cultural heritage. There's the opportunity to participate as a writer, as an author. The set of authors is a collection of, in the meantime, more than 40 young people from all over Europe and beyond, writing from their personal perspective about heritage-related topics in Europe. This is an online tool platform where the articles are published, and in addition, you see it on the photos, in a biannual rhythm, a printed version, a real newspaper is printed and published. All this, next slide, please, is only possible due to a very strong and diverse, one slide was missing, very strong and diverse, this one, network of partners. I see there's a problem with the loading, but you may understand that there's a network of partners behind, and we meet annually in autumn every year in another country to exchange among the partners and to create the base of this program, what I had mentioned and explained in the last 15 minutes. Last but not least, the last slide is similar as the first, but in addition, it contains the contact details. In case you would be, I have still 1 minute, I learned, in case you would be interested, so you can go to our website where most of the training courses on projects for the current year are published. There will still come up 4 or 5 additional ones later in the year. We have Facebook and Instagram, and very interesting on YouTube. We have around 7 short films of around 10 minutes length, which give an impression about the reality, how a European Heritage Volunteers project or European Heritage training course goes. Yeah, this was in an extreme rush, an overview about the European Heritage Volunteers program. I see there are still some problems with the slides, but at least I think you understood. European cultural heritage is very diverse, is very colorful, is very powerful, and it's really worth to engage for it because it provides a real learn about culture heritage than on the real culture heritage side. Experiences all challenges or problems, but at the end to have the success that you have achieved in a group and a result you can be proud about. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bert. Muchas gracias a todos por aguantar hasta el final, por todas las dificultades técnicas. Habéis visto, es súper interesante lo que está proponiendo. Si queréis tener una experiencia de patrimonio en muchas partes de Europa, aprender y todo esto, es un sitio estupendo. Los estudiantes, los que quieren interesar, por favor, Valentina es una de las grandes jefas de la asociación. Y bueno, ahora digo, y bueno, y ya que está Raquel aquí, si queréis que vengan este grupo de voluntarios y os arregle media isla o los muros de piedra seca o lo que haga falta, pues contactar con ellos perché seguro che si plantano qui. Semplicemente in italiano, se volete partecipare a questi corsi che sono incredibili, è fantastico, sembra una cosa che io se avessi 20 anni andrei subito. Niente, Valentina ti può informare di tutto.
Sì. Se avete bisogno, dato che non abbiamo avuto tanto tempo della logistica, posso spiegare un po' appunto anche i costi, come funziona, un po' le procedure. Non adesso, no, durante la giornata di domani sono qua e qualsiasi cosa, Bert can give them details concerning how it's working, more or less, the prices and more details that today we have no time enough to share with you. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone to stay here.